We're right smack dab in the middle of Cybersecurity Awareness Month. Maybe?
True.
Yeah.
So the topic we're going to talk through today a little bit is on patching and software updates and all things important to keeping your system secure. Jeff, pick on you for a minute. When we talk about software updates and patching and so forth, talk about it from a personal aspect. Your own PCs and laptops and Macs, whatever your preference is. How do you approach it, just from a personal perspective? Now, you're more technical maybe than the average person out there, but how do you approach it?
Well, that's a good question. So, me personally, I hate being Microsoft's beta tester. So, and Apple, right? So, I have sort of a dual mentality about it, because on the one hand, I'm aware that there are people out there that are definitely out there exploiting vulnerabilities in my iPhone and my PC at home. So I get that. On the other hand, I hopefully rely on the defenses that I built around my networks with encryption, with the firewalls that I have, and I usually have a VPN running constantly. So my ISP usually thinks I'm either in Denmark or Saudi Arabia, one of the two. But that being said, I like to patch my systems. I don't let Microsoft do it automatically. I tend to wait until the updates are ready. I like to actually look and see what's happening. And same with Apple. I'm usually 1 or 2 iOS versions behind the curve, just because it's been publicly known in the past. I think it's better now for Microsoft. It's not the case as much anymore. But Apple is not the best track record, as far as I'm concerned, of releasing patches for iOS and for all the devices that are perfect. So, and I wouldn't expect them to be perfect, but I don't want them to break my stuff either. In my lifetime, I have done some probably foolish things with software before. In my youth, I used to play with viruses, actually. Set them free on my machine and see what they would do to my machine. So I've bricked my Windows machine many times. So it's not just, for me, it's not just about patches. It's about everything. It's about virus definitions. It's about keeping all the applications I have up to date. And I'm pretty religious about it. So personally, I've never, knock on wood, I've never experienced a vulnerability that I haven't myself launched. So I think I've probably done a pretty good job of it. And considering my first computer was a Commodore 64 that didn't even have an operating system that could be patched. So far, so good, I think.
Bryan, I see you smirking over there at Jeff.
It's the Commodore 64 comment. He's just dating himself. So.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Well, that's great. That's really great.
I know for me personally, I'm not as technical as Jeff, and I've not purposefully bricked my own laptops and computers before. So I know for me, I'm not the first one. I don't have an auto update, but I know I make sure that I check them on a weekly basis at a minimum, and usually if there's any good news stories about an update out there, they're pretty quick to get out there these days. News stories / tweets.
Yeah,
you can define if a tweet is a news story or not, but usually there's some good information out there pretty early on. So, Bryan, what about you?
Yeah, echo a lot of what Jeff was saying. It's nobody loves to be the test dummy for Microsoft or anybody. Although it seems more nowadays the frequency of updates and that, especially given the sheer number of applications we're running, whether it's on a desktop, laptop, obviously all the apps on your phone and everything. There's this just constant barrage of updates, and it can be frankly overwhelming. But I'll take a little different angle on things. There's certain apps, my kids will come to me and say, hey, can I download this app? And my friend has it or whatever. And one of the things I look at for any of those apps is how often or what was the last update, and you end up seeing some of these apps that haven't been touched since 2018 or 2019.
Hmm.
And they're still out there in the app store. They're still cranking. They look really cool and everything. But you're thinking to yourself, wait a minute, like a lot's changed. Even in a year's time. Why aren't these guys maintaining this app? And how does it remain in the app store? Again, just an example of some of the things I'll look at. And looking at some of that. Otherwise, yeah, there's a lot. There's just like I say, that barrage of updates you get, whether it's Adobe, whether it's
Hmm.
Microsoft or any of the other applications, can be a daunting task. But in the spirit of Cybersecurity Awareness Month and kind of what we're talking about here, it's vitally important to keep things up to date. The schedule in which you do it and frequency, I think you have some control over. As Jeff said, he's runs a version or two behind. Nothing wrong with that, because we've all had Apple updates where they immediately turned around and issued a 3-dot revision to the one they just released yesterday, and you're like, oops, somebody messed up somewhere, and it's like, hurry up and download this. It has security fixes. I'm like, that was the one yesterday. So I think it's one of those things we've all kind of become accustomed to, right? Is updates and consistently updating. I think the only thing I try to pay attention to is there are quite a few applications out there that don't, I don't say auto update, but they're not going to notify you like, hey, there's a new version. Like, you have to go look for it. So I think being aware of which ones those are that you might be running, that aren't as proactive in notifying users about updates. Definitely be aware of applications you have running that require updates, and kind of have to manually go out to the website or find that next version out there.
So what about from a corporate perspective? We all live in the world of compliance, and especially in the electric utility space, this is a topic of interest in the compliance world. But set compliance aside for a minute, how should companies be thinking about systems and updates when they may have 3-4 employees, they may have 4,000 employees? What do you experience with organizations like that?
One of the big things, I've harped on this before, but and I think Jeff, you kind of alluded to it as well, and feel free to chime in. But the testing aspect of it, there, I've seen organizations that just, whatever Microsoft releases, we just basically pass through to everybody's machines and let it auto update. I'm like, well, that's a strategy, but we've also seen many instances where that's occurred, and it's caused some major issues with either some other proprietary applications or something that's running for that organization. So for me, the approach, for a lot of the organizations is take that measured approach and be deliberate about it, especially when it comes to testing. You need to understand what that environment is. You need to understand what applications are running in that environment. And if you have anything even halfway custom or, that even looks that way, making sure that it's not going to break it when it's applied. And obviously in industrial control systems, things are even more sensitive as far as operation. So for me, the testing aspect is one of the biggest pieces to not causing some widespread issues, across an enterprise.
Yeah, my birth in SIP was at 3 different power plants in San Diego. And when I first was introduced to the whole concept of an OT network that's separate from an IT network, where a corporate environment could be pulling down Microsoft patches whenever they're available, and to Brian's point, they can test them in an enterprise environment, right? They can test them on machines with the same image as potentially the one that you're using to check your email, right? Yeah. When I was introduced into the utility space, it kind of rocked my whole world, because on the one hand, I knew that Microsoft was releasing patches to various operating systems and applications on a regular basis. What I was not really familiar with at first, and kind of had to really struggle to adapt the mindset, was GE and Emerson can completely control what your patch environment can be. Yep. And it took a while for me to understand, like, oh, Microsoft just released vulnerability blah. Okay, well, it's going to take 3 weeks for GE to pass it through their systems and make sure that it doesn't break your industrial control system or your turbine system before you get it. Meanwhile, the clock keeps moving forward with additional patches that are being released. So for me, it was always a catch-up game. And, for any utility that I have worked with in the past, I always tell them, give yourself tremendous leeway and forgiveness when it comes to SIP7, because the patching, to do a patch management program well, is difficult no matter what. And to your point, it doesn't matter if you've got 3,000 people or 3. It's all dependent on the environment. It's dependent on your vendors. It's dependent on your support contracts, and it's hard. So I always tell utilities, like, be kind to yourselves when it comes to SIP7. It's not an easy thing to pull off well.
Mm-hmm. Yep, very true.
Let's continue down that path on the compliance side. Whether you're an electric utility or oil and gas is heading that way now through the TSA, water. There's compliance obligations as it relates to just overall cybersecurity and patch management. Jeff, you kind of started there, so I'll look at Bryan for a minute. When these utilities start there, are looking at compliance programs and patching programs and update programs, what are some things that they should think about, Bryan?
Yeah, I think Jeff really hit on it, is understanding what's in the environment and what's required there. Yeah, those control system environments, whether it's substation, otherwise, a generation plant, does things up to and including, is an outage required? Do they need to be, things need to be offline in order for them to update those systems, which is oftentimes the case, and that may occur once a year, because these are active systems, obviously generating or transmitting electricity. So I found it interesting that a lot of folks, especially in the earlier days of SIP and of compliance, didn't have that firm grasp on what's in the environment. What needs to be. Again, to Jeff's point, is understanding there's a lag. There's a delay. Oftentimes, even when you do get the patch from Siemens or GE or Emerson, when they've approved it, your actual application of that patch in your environment may be even further delayed. Up to months, if not years, just depending on operations and those kind of things. So that to me is the biggest thing from a compliance standpoint, is you got to know what you have. And believe it or not, there still are, we come across utilities and clients where they don't have as firm of a grasp on what's in their environment as they should by now. I mean, we've been doing this for how long? 15 years plus. So some folks still struggle, whether that be because of employee turnover or just, poorly documented processes. You've got to know what you have before you can even start down that path of, patch management, and let alone application and testing.
Well, in my previous life, when I was looking at entities' patch management programs, when they struggled or if they fell down when they were trying to meet the mark, my biggest piece of advice to them was the mitigation plan is your best friend, right? I mean, the ability to create a mitigation plan, to speak to exactly what Bryan just said, right? I can't take my power plant offline because it's August, and if I do, 2 million people are not going to be able to crank on their AC and charge their cars. So you mitigate with a mitigation plan, and you have that flexibility as long as you're maintaining it and updating it, to give yourself that flexibility and that space and time to wait it out or to plan it properly so that it doesn't disrupt operations. And I saw a lot of utilities struggle with that. And I always seem to go back to, okay, the standard gives you the ability to do this. You do it, and then you maintain it, and you follow up. And if you do that, then you're giving yourselves that breathing room that you need.
Last question I had is, if you could talk to all of the software companies out there and give them the supreme being overview of, boy, what you guys do for updates to the field, what would you like to say to them? What feedback would you like to give to the Microsofts and the Apples of the world when they're giving updates? Be nice.
Yeah, I'm thinking about that. Stop writing crappy code. No, that's the easy answer. But I don't know, Jeff. What would you say? I got a lot of smart aleck responses to that, but
I would say, and it's not just for the big ones, right? It's not just for Microsoft and Apple, but make it easier to find download and track your patches. I mean, I've seen so many instances where, if it's not off the shelf, or if it's off the shelf but it's been customized, or even the smaller players in the field, I don't want to have to hunt 7 layers deep into your website to get to support, I got to fill in a blank to put my name and my email address on. I just provide it readily available and make it simple, because to a point much earlier in the conversation, not everybody who's going to be, whether you're a large utility or a small utility, not everybody who's going to be involved in a patch management program is going to have a long history of IT, wealth of experience.
Yep.
And even less so probably in the OT space, because the OT space is still relatively new. So that would be my supreme being order. Make it easier on people. Jeez.
Yeah. Actually, that's really good, Jeff. Like, thinking about, because we've all been there trying to find what's the latest version of this, and then going to the website and, oh, you need an account, you need to log in, you need this, and then all to just download a simple file. The coordination, I guess I'll go down this path, but one of the things, especially the larger software companies, and again, I understand they can't do this for everybody all the time, but understanding the criticality of some of the systems that we deal with, I would really like to see better coordination between some of the larger software companies, the Microsofts of the world, or whatever you want to call large software, and the industrial control system space, the vendors, because as it stands, as we kind of talked about earlier, Patch Tuesday, Microsoft patches come out. It takes Emerson to go to Microsoft's website, like anybody else can, download that patch, and they've got to go through their internal testing process against their various versions of applications they have running out there. But to be able to, in an ideal world, I would love to see some sort of coordination between the companies to know that, hey, when we do release this patch, it's going to be good for Siemens or GE Systems or whatever. Again, perfect world. That's a pretty tall order, but it just seems like, hey, here's some stuff. Take it and don't even let us know if it breaks anything. It's like, go see if it breaks something, and good luck. That's what it feels like right now. So not a lot of communication or coordination. And like I said, obviously can't do that everywhere for every organization, but considering the types of systems and the consequences of knocking over a substation network or generation network, you think it would warrant some communication and coordination between parties there.
Well, Jeff and Bryan, thanks for another good conversation. DirectConnect here at Archer. If you guys have any questions out there, reach out to Bryan, Jeff, or myself. Happy to have a conversation with y'all.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great week.
Thank you.
For sure. Thank you.
Stay up to date on all the videos we release here at Archer by clicking on the subscribe button. Click on the bell to be notified right away when we release new videos. If you know of a topic or someone you think we should talk to on DirectConnect, please let us know in the comments below.